In this video, we're going to take a look at how to get started using Core Framework. It's a CSS framework that speeds up the design and development of websites. Now, you can use this in Gutenberg, you can use it in Oxygen and various other tools. We're specifically going to focus on using it with Bricks. But a lot of the fundamental things I'll cover will be applicable to no matter what platform you actually want to use it on. Now, to make life easier, there is a commercial add-on to allow you to use this with Bricks. You don't need it, but it does speed up the process and make things just a little bit smoother and more seamless. So I would recommend that. It is a cost involved in it, but it's a one-time purchase and it's available across all the sites you want to build with it. So you don't need to worry about paying a license fee every single year. Well worth it in my opinion. Now, while we're going to be using that plugin and we're going to use it inside WordPress itself, you can also use the free online version of Core Framework. This is a great way of being able to test things out, see how it all works. And if you want to grab that CSS code, you absolutely can do. Let's quickly take a look at how you can access that, and then we'll jump over into WordPress and take a look at the plugin in WordPress itself. So all you need to do is head over to the Core Framework website, link in the description down below, create a free account, and once you've done that, you can log in and you can access your dashboard. And inside your dashboard, you can choose to download the plugin, the latest version, or you can get it from the WordPress repo, or you can open up the web app. Opening up the web app gives you a couple of options. You can create a new project, or you can open up any of the existing projects you have. Let's open this one up in an editor. And you can see this now gives us the default standard Core Framework editor. So you make all the changes you want. I'm not going to go into detail right now. We'll cover those in WordPress itself. What you can do once you've finished is simply hit the save once you've made any changes, preview your CSS, and all of your CSS is available inside here. You can grab these values and you can use them in various different ways. So that's one way of using it. However, I do still think it's much easier to use this inside the editor in WordPress itself. So let's jump over to WordPress and take a look. So once you install the plugin, you'll have a new entry in your dashboard called Core Framework. If we open this up, you'll see we get the same editor, but like I said, we've got a couple of additional options here because we're using the plugin instead of just the online editor. You'll see I've already got the Bricks add-on installed and activated. We'll take a look at that in a moment, and you'll see we have some additional options here. Before we take a look and dive into the colors and typography and so on, let's quickly jump into the preferences. And inside here, take a look at what options we have, because there are some things that are incredibly important right off the bat that you need to set up. So you'll see we've got the project title. Change that to whatever you want that's applicable to the project you're working on. You can set your default theme, whether you want to work with a light theme or a dark theme. We'll leave that set to light. Now, if you want to find out how to use Core Framework to create light and dark themes, check out the video linked in the corner here and also linked in the description down below. I've covered how to use it. It's a great add-on to what we're going to cover in this video. Next up, we've got fonts and spacing. You'll see we've got our root font size and we can choose between 100%, in other words, 16 pixels as our base value, or we can work on 62.5%, which is 10 pixels. Now, these are used to calculate various different things inside the editor. And if you're using this with Bricks, we need to set those values up inside Bricks as well, so both things match up. And there's various different aspects of this we need to do. We'll take a look at those in a moment. Let's just go over the settings and then we'll see where we can set various different things up. Next up, we've got the minimum and maximum screen widths. Again, we're going to grab some of these values and we're going to use those inside Bricks itself. And we can use some of the variables that have been set up and created as part of Core Framework to make everything fully scalable. And this is the beauty of using something like Core Framework alongside Bricks. What we set inside here and transition over into Bricks itself, into one of our global themes, we can make changes then in one centralized location inside Core Framework, and all those changes will be reflected throughout our entire design. One of the key reasons why a framework just makes life so much easier when building websites. Now, before we go any further, a quick word from today's video sponsor. Are you looking for a hosting partner that takes speed and security seriously? Then look no further than Kinsta. Their hosting not only delivers lightning fast performance and top tier security, but also provides you with powerful MyKinsta tools. These tools are designed to empower you, making it easy to manage your WordPress site with absolute confidence. And when you need help, they have a WordPress experts available 24/7. No bots, just real answers and real support from people who understand WordPress. It's no wonder they rated 4.8 stars on G2 with over 740 reviews from satisfied users. This high rating and positive feedback should give you the confidence to trust in their services. Kinsta, the hosting solution that's fast, secure, and always backed by real support. Get started now using the link in the description below. Okay, let's get back on with today's video. Okay, so if we take a look underneath, then we've got some CSS processing. So you can see how we want to handle post CSS, whether we want to output rem units. If we're using gradients in our design and we're noticing that they don't look particularly good, maybe some banding and so on, we can enable this option to smooth those out and it'll give us a nicer gradient. I think it's worth setting that up inside here as well. Then if you want to, you can use prefixes for your customization for your classes and your variables. You can see by default they go to use CF for core framework, but if you wanted to use something specific to either you, your agency, your business, or a project, you can simply pop those inside here and they'll be used instead of the default CF on all of your variables in your classes. Up to you. I'm going to leave them as they are so everything is exactly the same if you were just copying along with me. Then we've got some options for accessibility and usability. So things like disable hover on touch devices, respect reduced motion, and so on. So again, set those up based upon your requirements in your project. And if you want to, you can add things like add group comments. So if you were working in an agency or you may be handing this off to someone else, having comments inside your overall sort of setup could be very useful. And then you've got your plugin preferences. You can switch between various different ones. So we can switch this over to a light theme, a dark theme, or a grey theme. Personally, I prefer the dark theme. Choose what you want. And then if you want to white label this, you maybe hand this off to a client and you don't want them to know you're using core framework, you can set those options up inside here, including the plugin name, the icon you want to use, and so on. Pretty useful. And then we've got the reset button. So if you've made changes inside here and you want to reset everything back to the default settings, hit that. But only do it if you know what you're doing. Okay, so there's the preferences. Let's quickly take a look at how we can utilize some of these inside Bricks itself. Specifically, these fonts and spacing values. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up any page in Bricks. It doesn't matter what page, it could be a template, anything. We just want to access the theme style. For example, we'll just use my 404 template. Doesn't really matter. So what we're going to do is we're going to come into the settings section and into theme styles. Now I've set up pretty much everything that I want inside here, but let me just show you how you do it, and then you can customize this the way that you see fit. So if you don't know, everything inside the theme styles will be the default whenever you insert things like sections, containers, divs, blocks, and so on, buttons, accordions. You can set up their default values. Now, you don't need to set everything up inside here, but there are some things I would recommend you do to ensure that you have a great seamless experience between core framework and also inside your Bricks design. Now, I've already created a global theme style. All you need to do this if you don't have one is click on create, give it a name, hit create, and that's it, done. Then you can choose it, come into your conditions and specify where you want to use this. So first things first, we're going to come into the element container. Now, if you don't know, the container sits inside your section. Sections are full width, containers are by default about 1100 pixels, but we can use core framework and a variable to be able to handle that. So we expand this out. We're going to set a variable up inside here for the max width. So we know we've set the max width for 1366. So we could put the value 1366 in here. Problem with that is it's an arbitrary value. So if we change that inside core framework, we're going to have no change inside here. We're going to have to manually come in and change it, which kind of defeats the purpose. So what we're going to do is we're going to just type in the word max. And you'll see max screen width was selected, and we're now using a variable for that max screen width, which is connected through to our core framework setup. So that's going to use 1366 unless we change it in core framework to whatever we want. It's as simple as that. We're going to set the width to 100%, so it just kind of picks up what it says the max width there, and it'll be 100% of that. Again, you can come into your sections if you want to, and inside here you can set things up. So we've got various section widths, which is a custom variable that I've set up. So let's leave that as it is for now. So now we've set those up. There's one final thing I want to show you inside here just for this part. We're going to come into the typography setting, and inside there you'll see HTML font size is set to 62.5%. So as long as you've got that set up inside core framework, you just need to match that up inside here. However, if you prefer to work with 100%, all you need to do is change that inside here. So you can just hop in, change that to 100%, and then have exactly the same inside core framework. Then you'll have everything set up and configured the way that you like to work. We'll hit save just to commit everything, and we are done at this point. Now, there's so much more we can do inside here, and we'll take a look at some of the other options as we go through this video. For now, let's leave this and jump back into core framework. Now, if you're getting value from this video, why not hit that thumbs up button just to let YouTube know that you are enjoying it? However, if you're not, well, you can hit the thumbs down button twice, as that seems to work pretty well too. Anyway, let's get back on with this core framework tutorial. So now we've set things up for the fonts and spacing and transferred that information over into our theme style. What else do we have inside here? Well, if you use the Bricks plugin, you can come in here and you've got some additional options which you can customize the way you want. I'm going to leave those as they are. I don't tend to leave everything enabled. You come into add-ons. If you've got any additional add-ons, you can activate those. If you want to use the free Gutenberg one, you can just enable that. You don't need to install anything extra. And the same thing goes for Oxygen and Figma. If we take a quick look in the Manage project, you'll see this will include all of the information contained inside colors, typography, and so on. So you can quickly delete things from here as opposed to going through and deleting things one at a time. So for example, if you didn't want to use custom spacing classes, you could click on delete, or you can click on the preview CSS and see what CSS is associated with it. So this is a way of seeing all the default values and easily disabling them, deleting them, whatever you want. Even you can drag these around and reposition them should you want to. However, if you want to export and import those in as a starting point into another project, you can export them from here, you can browse your files, and you can simply choose that .core file and import those values in here, and you can import all the values, select values, whatever you want. If you want me to cover that in more detail, let me know in the comment section down below. I can create a video on that. For now, just know this allows you to import and export and quickly manage content. Okay, let's jump over now into colors. So inside here, we've got this option at the top, which is all breakpoints. And as you can see, we can change this between the various different breakpoints we have set up inside Core Framework. So what you can do is you can set different values for things like your colors, your spacing, and so on, based upon the breakpoint. Again, I'm not going to cover that in this video because I think it's a little bit too advanced for what we want to cover. But if you want me to cover it, let me know down below. So we leave that set as all breakpoints. And now you can see we've got things broken down into various different color groupings. Your brand colors, your background, your text, your neutral, your status, design elements, and so on. If we take a look at any of these, you'll see the group has a couple of options. The three little dots allows us to disable, duplicate, move, and so on. You can also delete from here if you want to. Then inside each one of these, you'll see if we hover over, we'll get three little dots that allows us to manage this specific color. We can click, and again, a lot of the same options are there. So you wanted to duplicate this, you can duplicate it, rename it, do whatever you want with it. If you want to get rid of it, click those three dots, hit delete, confirm it, and it's gone. So now let's take a quick look at the color options. You can see we've got these color chips, and we've got two color chips in some examples and only one in others. That's because we're using dark and light mode. So if we expand out our first color, which is our primary color, you'll see enable dark mode is selected. If we disable that, we now only get one color chip. So if you don't want to work in a dark mode, just disable it. Cuts down the amount of colors you've got, makes life a lot easier. Now speaking of colors, there's a couple of ways in which you can work with them. We can click on the color and we open up the various different options for changing that color. So we can easily drag this around, adjust the lightness values, or we can use the HSL sliders underneath. However, you may want to work in a different mode. You may want to work in RGB or hexadecimal values. Well, all you need to do is click on this little drop down and choose what you want from the list. So if you prefer to work in hex colors, choose that, and you'll see now our colors change. So we've got a different way of working. Come into RGB. You can see we've got RGB with alpha, so all the values in there, and it'll automatically convert them for you. So you can easily put a value in hexadecimal, switch it over to something like RGB alpha, and if you want to, you can work in that color mode and switch back and forth. If you enable dark mode, you'll see we now get two color chips, and this allows us to set the different colors for the light mode on the left, the dark mode on the right. So like I say, let's just disable that for now. We can also then get it to generate utility classes for our text, background, borders, and fills. So you can easily enable or disable any of these. Hovering over any will give you information about that specific function. Underneath then, we've got generate transparent variants, generate shades, generate tints. So if you like to work with transparent versions of your colors, all you need to do is click on this and it will automatically generate those for you. Same thing goes if you want to work with shades. Shades are basically darker versions of your color, and tints are lighter versions of your color. You then can easily control how many of each you want. So you may say you only want 2 lighter and 2 darker. Well, you can set those values inside there. Simple as that. If you don't want to work with those, simply disable them and job done. And this is the same with all of these. You can easily enable or disable whatever you want inside there. Simple as that. Then you've got your background color. So again, all the same things actually work here. So once you've made your changes, you can save your changes, and all those changes will be reflected inside your core framework CSS file. Now, you come down to the bottom and you can see I've got some design elements. These are custom elements that I use on my designs. So things like, example, like borders. I set a black and a white. I like to have a solid black and a solid white. So I've always got those values available if I want to use them in my design. Want to create a new color group? Click on that. There's your new group. We'll just call this test colors. And now we can easily come in, choose a color that we want. Let's go for something like this red color. We can name this and you can set any values you want. Simple as that. Want to get rid of it? No problem at all. Let's just delete this group. If you want to create selector groups or variable groups, you can do that here as well. Now let's just jump into the typography settings. So inside typography now we have a lot of options available. And the nice thing with this is totally fluid. So we can set up our minimum, our maximum values, and everything will scale proportionally in between. And the beauty of this, having a nice fluid setup for our typography and spacing, is that as we grow or shrink our designs, we don't see those sort of like breakpoint jumps where it goes from one size and then jumps to the next and jumps to the next. We get a smooth transition as things scale proportionally. So it's a much nicer way of working. So let's take a quick look at how this works. Down the left-hand side, we've got our basic settings, and then on the right-hand side, we've got a preview of what it's going to look like at the different responsive points. So for example, start off, we've got the naming convention. So text is what's being used inside here, but you can, if you want to change this to something else, again, you may be using your own naming conventions that you're used to inside your agency or working with external sort of suppliers. Change it to whatever you want inside here, and that'll be reflected inside the actual editor and everywhere you want to use it in bricks. Then you've got your minimum and your maximum font size. The font that I'm using is Barlow, which tends to be a little bit of a smaller font. So I tend to set my minimum to 18, whereas by default it'll be 16. And then maybe you want to set your maximum to 22. And again, this controls the minimum and maximum sizes at the medium breakpoint. So you can see there's your 18, there's your 22. As you jump up to bigger text sizes, large XL and so on, you can see they scale proportionally. Now, speaking of the scaling, we control that by the scale ratio. And these are all standard terms that are used when it comes to fluid typography. So you go open this up and you see you've got minor second, major third, and so on. So we choose different ones. You'll see that will adjust the actual scaling. So our base stays at 18 and 22, but you'll see the next ones will either increase or decrease based upon what you choose. So if we go right the way up to the -7th, so you see we get bigger jumps between each one of these values. Let's put that back though, and we'll use the -3rd. That's a nice scale. So we've got everything from text extra small right the way through to text 4XL. But if you want more, all you need to do is click. We now have 5XL, 6XL, and it's all using the same scaling as we've just seen. Then the final thing inside this section is the base scale index. This is what it's going to use as the baseline. So the values you set, the 18 and the 22, that's set inside medium. You can change that if you want to. You want to make it under small, you can see you can change it. You want to make it large, and that will then impact how these things scale. Okay, so let's set that back to the medium. Then underneath, you can see we've got class generators, so we can set a class generator for our text. Our headings are already set up for us, so H1 through H6, and these are then referencing the variables that are created at the top. So you can see we've got text XL, for example. If we come down here, you can see text XL is set up for H4, set inside there. So as we change the values inside here, they will reflect throughout our headings and everything else. This, again, is where that sort of flow comes in really, really handy. So all these are set up, and you can see we've also got our line heights are set up, but you can easily change these, should you want to whatever values you want. Then underneath, we've got our line heights, text modifiers, so things like bold, italic, and so on. And if we come right the way down, your text alignments, anything else. And again, we can create selector groups and variable groups should we want to. If you make any changes, simply hit the Save Changes here and you are done. Tell me the spacing, and again, you can see this works in a very, very similar fashion. You can set your naming convention, your minimum, your maximum sizes, and the scale ratio. And we've got a visual representation of how this works. And again, we've got our base value set on M for medium. Scrolling down, again, we've got our class generators for our padding, for our margins, and so on. Come down, you can see I've created a custom class here called Sticky Fix, which is to handle the spacing when it comes to the sticky header. So we can use those. So you can easily create your own selector groups, your own variable groups, and you can expand what you want inside Core Framework. Then we're going to take a quick look at components. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail here about components, but if you want to know more, let me know in the comment section down below and I can create a video for it. But components are basically pre-designed elements that we can use by just assigning that class to it. So for example, if we add a button into our design and we give it a class name of .btn, it will pick up the styles that we set inside here. If we want to use a badge or an input field or a link, we can use those inside here as well. Now, if we open one of these up and edit it, you can see this gives us a ton of options. So if you want to have complete control over your buttons and not rely upon your theme styles inside bricks, you could use this. And as you can see, we've got a bunch of different things for hover, for focus, but also a bunch of modifiers. So we've got small, large, secondary, tertiary, slight, ghost, and so on. So different kinds of buttons. We click them, we see the differences. So let's go back to our standard button. If we now take a look on the right-hand side, this is where you can set up all of the different values you want to assign to it, and you can reference those variables as well. So for example, if we take a look at the font size, you can see this is using the variable of text medium. It's using the font weight of 600, and we're using a border radius of medium. So this is then controlled by the settings we set up inside Core Framework, and they will then be reflected inside any of the components. So they're useful. I just don't tend to use them that often, but if you want me to cover them, let me know down below. So let's just confirm that and close it. Then if we jump into layouts, you can see we've got things inside here for handling my custom one, which is my section width, but also we've got our grid variables if you're using CSS Grid. So I'll cover some of CSS Grid very briefly in this tutorial, but I'm not going into too much detail. And again, you can see there's our columns, automatic columns and so on. So this gives you lots of control, and then you can take a look. Our grid template is using the repeat function where our auto fit and min max, and all those values are set up, but you can, as always, change anything you want inside here. Then any way you use it inside your design, those changes are reflected. Coming to design, we've got some sort of like design oriented things like drop shadows, border radiuses, and those kinds of things. So if you want to create ones inside here, you can do that for yourself. And then other is kind of like a catch-all for anything that doesn't kind of fit into those groupings. So things like your visibility, your display, and so on. Positioning, you get the idea with it. So once you've set everything up inside here, hit your save changes, and then that's connected up through into your copy of WordPress and bricks. So let's take a quick look at some of the other things that you may want to set up inside your theme style. One of the most common ones is going to be set things like your colors and so on up to connect those up to your Core Framework colors. And it's super easy. If we come into colors inside here and open this up, you can see I've already done it. But all you need to do, primary color, click on it, choose your primary color from the list, and secondary color, choose your secondary color, your tertiary, your darks, your lights, and so on. And then whenever you use colors inside your theme, it will reference these inside here. So you can go through and set all these options up. You can come down, for example, into your button. We'll take a look at our primary button. Inside here, set your colors. So again, you can reference the colors you want. So it makes sense to have primary. Your typography, you can set your font size. So we can simply come in here. We can right click and we can choose our font size. So let's say by default, the text is going to be medium. You get the idea. You can map everything you want to your Core Framework values, and then this is kind of connected through to it. So you make changes in that place in Core Framework, and all of your theme style will change accordingly. It's incredibly powerful, but it does take a little bit of time, and that's why I would recommend once you've done something like this, save it as a blueprint. Again, I've created a video on setting up blueprints, which you can check out here and link in the description. It will save you so much time. We've seen how we can set these values up. Now let's take a look at how we use these inside the builder itself. So I've created a new page now. It's blank and ready for us to take a look at some of the things we can do with Core Framework. Now I do have advanced theme installed, so my setup is going to probably look a little different to yours. Don't worry, the only thing I may use are going to be these options down the right-hand side to simply speed up than choosing the same options from our elements panel in the left-hand side. So sections, divs, blocks, you get the idea. So let's go and add in a section. So that has added in a section in exactly the same way we would expect it to. So now what we can do is we can work in a couple of different ways. There's the optimal way and there's the less than optimal way, but you may want to reference this at some points. So for example, we may want to apply some spacing to this section. So what we can do is we can come up to our classes in the top left, click inside there, and we can just search for margin. And there's all of our variables for our margin. So we could easily say we want to put margin 2XL. Click, and we've added margin 2XL. We'll get rid of it, click, and get rid of it. Same thing goes for padding. So you can add padding inside here. You get the idea. But that's not the best way of working. It makes much more sense to set things up in such a way that when you want to have a class and you want to have multiple different things applied to it, you do it by creating a custom class and applying the variables inside the element itself. Let me show you. So for example, we may want to grab this section. I'm going to give it a name. So we'll just come over and we'll call this test. Very original. So now we've got test. There's one class being applied. So now what we can do is we can come into style, for example, and into layout. So let's come into our margin. We'll right click and we'll say we want to apply 2XL at the top. We've now applied some extra space at the top, but we've used the variable instead of inserting a default value. Now, obviously you could put in things like, rem values and things like that, but it kind of defeats the whole purpose of having things set up inside Core Framework and connecting things up. So there's one value. So let's say we want to apply something else. Maybe you want to apply a background color to our section or our container. So let's choose our container. You can see we have no class applied to this. So let's just use BEM naming to make our life easier. We've created test. So there we go. But what we need to do now is target the container. So we're going to do __ container in this example. Hit enter, and now we've targeted that. So now what we can do is we can come into our background, we can right click, and you can see this will open up the colors we have available inside Core Framework. So let's say we want to apply this tertiary color. Boom, we've now applied the tertiary color. Let's also say that we want to come into our borders. We're going to open up the border option, and we're going to come into our radius. So let's just right click. There's our radius. Let's say we'll set a radius of medium. And we've now applied some radius to it. Pretty cool. So now the beauty of this is that this is all underneath one different class. So for example, now if we create a new section, none of those things are applied to this until we go in and apply the class of test. So there's our extra space. We'll come into our container. We'll do test again. Test container. Boom. You can see that's changed. Now, say for example, we save this. And we go back into Core Framework, come into our colors, change our tertiary color. Let's set that to be red, for example. Hit Save Changes. Come back into our editor and refresh it. And now you can see they've picked up the colors we've just changed. So one centralized location, and all those changes are reflected. It's pretty simple and pretty cool. Let's get rid of these. Let's insert a new section. Let's go and apply test to give us the spacing at the top. Okay, so now with that selected, let's go and add in a block. So there's our first block. Let's go and add 2 more blocks in. Nice. We now have a container with 3 blocks in. So let's say we want to use CSS Grid. We'll choose our container and come over to display and change this to grid. So now that opens up all the CSS Grid options. So now we can again use our different variables. So instead of putting a gap in, let's right click and let's just choose medium. Boom, we now have things set up. Let's say we want this to be in 3 columns. Right, cool. All we need to do is right click and say we want 3 columns. We now have a 3-column layout all set up inside here. So let's switch this over to something like portrait, and we still have 3. So that makes no sense. So all we need to do is right click and say 1. So we now have 1 all set up. So instead of us having to write in this little block of code, you can see this is automatically done. Switch back into our desktop. We're back into our 3 columns. It's changed everything over. We haven't had to make any changes here. We've simply used that right click and told it exactly what we want. It is so simple. And now if you want to, you can easily come in, choose our block, and we can start styling it. So let's say we want to add in, we'll add in an image, we'll add in a title, and we'll add in some basic text. So for good housekeeping, let's quickly rename our first block to card. While we're at it, we're going to come over and add a new class called card. Hit enter. So now we're applying our classes to this particular card design. So what we can do now is, once we've selected that, is come over and do things like apply some row gaps so we kind of keep a nice space. So again, we can use those variables that we've got from Core Framework. So let's set something like 2xs. We don't want too big a gap in between. It looks pretty good. So now what we can do is we can use BEM naming to name each one of the individual components inside our card, and then we can start applying styles to them. So let's do that. Choose our heading. We'll come over, card __ heading. We'll do the same for our image. And finally, we do the same for our excerpt. So we've now applied classes to each one of these. We've used BEM naming. Again, if you like to say, if you want to find out more about BEM naming, link in the description. So now we've got everything set up. So now we can start applying styles to these, adding content and so on. So let's just change the image over and actually put an image inside here. I'll just use one of my placeholder images. It doesn't really matter what it is. Click insert. We now have an image. So now it's easy to start styling these things. So for example, let's come to our heading. H3 is fine for this. We'll make sure we've got our class selected. We'll leave the heading as it is. Doesn't matter what content's inside there for now. Come into our style, into our typography. Again, like we've seen before, we can right click. We'll set this to be large, for example. So you can see there's our styling. We can select our image. We can come over, make sure the class is selected, come into our border as an example. Open this up. Set a radius to these so we can kind of round the edges off. Again, using the variables that we've got as part of Core Framework. So we'll set these to be something like medium. That looks pretty good. Okay, so we've now got those basics all set up. If we want to do things like set the ratio of this, we can come into our content, for example, set our aspect ratio. So we can say something like 1:1, so it's square. Object fit, we'll set to cover. So now we're applying this styling here. So just for ease, let's just delete these two additional blocks and let's just duplicate our card. So you can see now each one of those picks up the styling. So as we've seen before, when you're using classes, you can easily change any of the information, any of the styling applied to that particular class, and it will reflect everywhere it's being used. But we take that one step further with Core Framework by having that one centralized location. So if we want to change things like the scaling for our headings, we can do that inside Core Framework. We want to change the scaling for our typography, the size and radius borders we've got set up on our images. You know, you can set all these up, you can configure them, and then you can go back at any point and change them really easily inside Core Framework. Now, the other cool thing to bear in mind is because we are using the Core Framework color setup and we've set up light and dark mode. And like I say, I've covered this in a dedicated video, but let me just quickly show you. All these are using those global colors with a light and dark mode set up. So if we come up and switch over to dark mode, everything looks awesome. Everything is set up exactly as you want. So you can see our links, our content, all set up the way you want it to. Switch it back to light mode, job done. It really is that simple. Now, this really is just scratching the surface of what you can do by using a framework like Core Framework. It's a centralized location, and once you set everything up inside your copy of bricks, like I say, using the theme styles, mapping everything out inside there, save it as an overall blueprint, like I've covered in the video in the details down below. All of the hard work is done for you. All you need to do is go into Core Framework and change anything you need to inside here. If you want to change your primary colors, your secondary, tertiary, add additional colors in, enable, disable, light and dark mode, all those options are set up inside here. Want to change your typography scale? Simple. All you do, come into typography, we'll say that our minimum font size is going to be 16 and our maximum is going to be 20. Now you can see everything will reflect. Change our scale over and say you want to use something like a perfect fifth. You can see that changes. You get the idea. We hit the save changes. Our entire site has those changes made in a second. So easy to do. Now, there's way more that I could cover when it comes to working with Core Framework. And if you'd like me to cover anything specific, like I said earlier in the video, please do let me know in the comment section down below. And if enough people are interested, I will create some content specific to those questions or those queries. So let me know what you're after in the comment section. As always, all applicable links are in the description. If you want to learn more about working with bricks and Core Framework, you can check out this video next. As always, my name is Paul C. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.